Hi, hi, hi. Oh, sorry. Okay, I just spent like an hour looking for this, what do you even call it? Let me know if it's too quiet. But anyways, I was looking for, okay, am I crazy, atheists right now in the chat? Make yourself known. But in 2023, November, maybe late October, maybe early December, was there like a convention or open debate going on with like prominent atheists like Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, maybe even Jordan Peterson? Was there an event? Because I was like preparing this opening for the video today, like going to do this interaction, like who's the guest that we're reacting to and whatever. And I was like, oh, is the person the person. Is the lady that came out as Christian. She's like a known atheist. And she came out right before a panel that she dropped out of. It was like the talk of the town. And I'm asking Janet, ChatGPT, my ChatGPT, and it's like this thing didn't exist. It existed. I just don't know what it was. I remember exactly where I was when I heard the news, but I heard the news on a podcast. Weird. Okay. Anyway, how's everybody? How are the beautiful people? Ow. Like it's quiet, but I'll turn it up over here. Ew, I feel like we can hear background noise. Anyways, so today's video, we're Alex O'Connor, our favorite atheist, had I gotta read the name because I'm gonna find it. Ayaan Hirsi Ali on his channel, which if you don't know who she is a Somali-born author, scholar, and activist known for her outspoken views on religion, women's rights, and freedom of expression. Once a devout Muslim, she fled to the Netherlands to escape a forced marriage, later becoming an atheist and a critic of Islam, particularly its treatment of women. A former Dutch parliamentarian, okay, she was part of the parliament. She is the author of books like Infidel and Heretic, which explore her personal journey and critique religious doctrines. Recently, she converted to Christianity, citing its moral framework and emphasis on forgiveness. Her work continues to spark global discussions on faith, freedom, and human rights. So, I saw this video pop up and I was like, okay, Alex, redeeming yourself. He never was or he was never not redeemable, but when I reacted to the Richard Dawkins and Jordan Peterson infamous debate, I called it. Did I not? Did I not? One of my critiques was that I was like, oh no, Richard Dawkins is sort of shaping his way of thinking, which is not a bad thing. We love Richard Dawkins. But my fear was that there was like a bias being sort of put on him, unbeknownst to him. It's a bold claim. Okay, it's a bold claim. But I was talking about how Jordan Peterson has this way of thinking and he's trying to solve this. And in order to solve that, we need Richard Dawkins to get there. This is not to be confused with like an atheist now finding God and we need him to convert. That's not what we're No, okay. Um, it's more so like there's kind of this framework that exists, but there's no language to describe it. There is. We just haven't collectively agreed on it. Excuse my upspeech. So, anyways, I was like, we need Richard Dawkins to get it so that we can progress. And so after that debate, it seemed like when I watched him on somebody else's channel, I can't think of the name of the girl, um, they were talking about the recent election, and it just seemed clear. I don't remember exactly quotes, but it was almost like he was annoyed with Jordan Peterson. I get it. Okay. Listen, listen. To those that don't necessarily get where Jordan's coming from, or they assume he's asserting a belief set, I get it. It's frustrating, but like he's not doing that. He's not asserting a belief set. He's talking in a way that's showing his work. And I do the same thing, literally. So I get it. Um, Sometimes I think he goes a little bit too, like, he's going a little bit too far. And I don't think people, well, maybe. I was like, I don't think people are like telling him this. But when I did that video, I noticed that this makes me sound fucking nuts. like I noticed the recent Jordan Peterson video. He by recent I mean on Piers Morgan, like today, he had mentioned the frustrations he's having with communicating it or whatever. And that was like the first time I've heard him acknowledge it. And it had been based off of one of the things I said in the video. I can't remember exactly what it was. We could watch it, it'll come to me. Anyways, so watching both of them, Alex O'Connor, Jordan Peterson, not Richard Dawkins. I don't know if he's made a recent video, but it seemed like it wasn't really coming together. And I was like, well, fuck, there goes my hope for civilization. It's like, fuck. But this video popped up, and I was like, okay, for sure. That alone proved me wrong. Okay. If you guys aren't familiar with like atheist communities, I don't know why you wouldn't be. I feel like that's what we talk about over here. I've been pointing out something that it's not like new information, and everybody says this, that the atheists will operate like it's a religion, like moral outrage just without God. And then you have the Christians, or you have religious people that they get outraged or whatever. And I was just like dumbfounded that both couldn't see when they would discuss with each other. I'll give an example in a second, but when they would come together, that they're saying the same thing. For instance, okay, on that debate that I didn't talk at all, it was just because literally there's nothing to add when like you're saying the same shit. Um, I sound insane. Okay, it's the first time I'm talking out loud. What do you call it? So, community wise, atheists get very um, triggered, triggered, pissed when people will even try to introduce the concept of belief or God. Understandably so. I mean, but at the same time, that's like kind of it's kind of the theme. Um, Whatever. But I'll give examples. We're gonna go through like the comment section. I'm just trying to get my thoughts together. Um, in the video that I did before the Richard Dawkins and Jordan Peterson one specifically, I had critiqued Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson in their debate on the same fucking concept, because everybody had been saying, oh, he's talking word salad, referring to Jordan Peterson. like almost like spam bots. I don't even know who's real. I sound insane. Um, I don't know. It like looked like a smear campaign, if you will. And I was like, ah, da, 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 da. Hi, Louise. Love you. Thank you for the gifted memberships. Um, and so I was critiquing that video, and I'm like, why is Sam Harris? He's like, he has this bias, or that's how it appears. And I was like, why is he operating? Why is he trying to operate in the same framework when we're talking about two separate frameworks? So what I mean by that is like if Jordan Peterson is asked, did Moses cross the Red Sea or whatever, and the person asking it is trying to elicit a response on something literal, like either yes or no, in order to substantiate an empirical truth. It's like, why are you asking that when all the context that Jordan gave before it specified the fact that we're not talking about empirical truth? He just goes a roundabout way of saying it. And we had like the text on the screen, so it wasn't like interpreted differently, but it was like, why, if you are trained in philosophy, we are talking about two separate frameworks. And by trained, I just mean read. Like, it's like not that serious. And this would keep happening. And then I was like, maybe like it's not that obvious. Um, and so fast forward to when I had made the video with Richard Dawkins and Jordan, I explained that there were like multiple types of truths. And so, depending on what truth you're trying to substantiate, requires a different framework. Jordan Peterson asking, well, it depends on what you mean when you say, is what you're supposed to do when the other person is asking for a specific thing and this person knows that, but they clarify the thing because their answer is going to depend on this and not what you're asking. And by trying to explain that it's not what you're asking, he tries to clarify it in the beginning. And people took that as combative. I mean, I kind of get it. It's just like if anybody's going to be really clear and specific, I feel like Jordan Peterson's like the perfect person to do that. So that was like weird. Eventually, in that conversation, Richard Dawkins was finally operating in the framework Jordan was trying to explain. And this framework is not um, grounded yet. So we're talking like a theoretical framework. That's what, and it's like, well, why the fuck? Because Jordan literally shows his work. You can tell in the way he's talking, he's looking for something that he doesn't have the answer to. And so when I saw this video, we're just like looping. Like, fucking Jesus. I saw this video and I was like, oh, well, that's a different attitude than right after that debate. Like I said before, it almost seemed like we weren't going to get anywhere. And then I see this pop up. And although we can assume that it was just the next guest in the calendar, or we can assume that Alex O'Connor is a true independent thinker and curious about what others are trying to convey. And so I'm going to operate like it's the second one. I like that one. I think that's a good thing. And so I explained who she was, but she's like if somebody is trying to argue for religion against atheism, this is who you would use for that. She was, so like I said, she was being forced into a arranged marriage, and she fled. Uh, Muslim, fled to the Netherlands. If you guys have watched me for a while, the Netherlands is like peak, in my opinion, um, peak when it comes to a lot of things, but the way they structure everything and the moral code book, whatever you want to call it, they're ahead of us. I know we like to think we're the best, but we're not. Okay. If if I'm ever trying to think how should we organize the world in America specifically, I'm like, how should we organize it? Well, what does the Netherlands do? And that's kind of like where I go. They've been liberal since before it was a fucking thing. Okay. Get it together, bitch. Um, it's the fact she was on, like, this woman has lived the life I could only dream of. Not the first part, okay? Not the first part. Incredibly traumatic. I'm talking about what she's gone on to do. And essentially, she's like a human rights activist, former religious, arguably the not good religion. More on that later. So she can see the disparity on why operating in something like a secular nation is arguably better. But not only that, she has since realized that Christianity is true. Now, could she have lost her mind, developed a mental illness, and now she's religious? Sure. But I would put her up there with Richard Dawkins. So do what you will with that information. Do what you will. I would say that's probably not a good way to look at it. If anybody is going to substantiate any religion, it's going to be her. Now, some people might say, well, she grew up in a religious household. Of course, she's been conditioned to eventually go back. Also valid. Also valid, period. Also. As far as religion goes, I know some people are like, oh, you're an atheist, whatever. I've been saying Christianity, I support it. It's arguably parts of Hinduism and Buddhism as well. But Christianity genuinely is like equivalent to operating in like a psychologically healthy secularist nation. You're probably like, what the fuck? I'm writing about it. Okay. Okay. Um, like if somebody held was like you are not allowed to live in a secular world, I would only hope it would be Christianity that we would operate under. And so that sort of statement triggers atheists. I hear you. Okay. I get it. What I am not saying is that I believe in a supernatural God. Or did I say that right? Deity, whatever. It's not what I'm saying. I think that we are entering a new world. I don't know. Have you guys felt the vibes? The vibes are changing. They're changing, are they not? I told it. I told you. I called it. And that we need to figure out how to. What's the next right move? So I developed a framework that I'm not 100% confident to detail in this video, but essentially it's taking Christianity and determinism, and they fit. And I said it recently. I was like, you know, it fits. The only thing that I dislike is kind of foundational to Christianity. And if I say it on the outset, it might turn people away, but trust the process, okay? I don't think that God is a separate being. Also, by the way, if if this type of content, religion, um, the theoretical, combining it with truth, if this triggers you mentally, like, click off on this one, come in on the next one. I know for some people, operating with religious stuff can trigger you into psychosis, okay? If you think you're God, take the meds. Love you. I'm just kidding. Honestly, you probably are. But, anyway, so religion, religion. I don't think God is separate. Ironically, I'm about to be like, "You are God." It just sounds insane. It literally like I literally just said, "Take your meds," right? But I think God is like human consciousness, which I don't know what sounds worse. Believe me, I get it. It sounds like magic. Um, but I look at it like an equation on how to figure out what the right thing to do is in multiple scenarios. And I find when you uh like substitute God for whole version of you, it fits. And it also fits all of the myths in the Bible, the stories in the Bible. It all works. And there's something that exists. Some Buddhists would call it non duality, which makes sense. And there's like, it's so complicated to articulate. It's like religion gets it, though. Christianity gets it. Christianity has articulated it. That's why the whole thing with Richard Dawkins and Jordan Peterson was like iconic. I'm telling you guys, there's you take the Bible, Christian version, and you lay it on top of like the DSM, it fits. That's a really poor way of putting it. Okay. If you put it, if you were to lay out, let's say we had like a DSM that laid out all of the traumas in the world, that might be a better way to put it. A death, um, something abuse. Think of all of like the worst things that could happen. I don't know what book would have that other than like maybe a DSM. That's why I used it. If you had all of that laid out and what to expect from every possible perception, complicated, believe me, it sounds insane. Every possible perception of it, and you laid it on top of the Bible, it fits. Now, that could just be something like, well, of course, religion is used to make people feel better about their shitty circumstance. I hear ya. Okay. I acknowledge this. Um, but I don't think that is necessarily a reason to write it off, especially when it's coming from people who are very critical of um, religion and what it can do to somebody that's like unstable, for instance. You know what's also crazy and this is random, but it was like, which philosophers have dealt with dealing with people with like severe mental illness? And you're like, how the fuck does that fit in? It does, because it's your entire perception and being able to judge perception switches. It's a whole thing. And I found out like a lot of the really big philosophers had somebody close to them develop severe mental illness. Now, I'm not doing the synchronicity shit. I'm just saying I thought it was interesting because some of the most wise people that I know have also dealt with something like that. So it was like a weird thing that I noticed. Anyways, before I get too loony in this bitch, let's go to the actual video. So it's going to sound like she is explaining her testimony, but I want to offer a different perspective from somebody who is still like a cold and mean atheist. Okay. It'll make sense. Love you.
Alex, thank you very much.
Also, I sped it up just a tad and I added captions.
Much for having me.
It's
really
been
loud.
an incredible year for you, coming out as a Christian, dealing with the reactions and criticisms as a result of that. My first question is, how are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
I hope so. How is your life different from a year ago when you'd become a Christian, but you were getting ready to talk about it? It wasn't part of your public persona yet. How has life?
I feel like it sounds weird. Should I get I have the original. You guys spam the chats with ones if the audio is bad or annoying.
Changed for you?
Well,
2 if it's fine.
I think I was troubled in my heart, in my head, and I'm in a place of peace. I'm at peace with what I do, with where I am, with my work, with my family, and it's something new for me. So sometimes there's this sense that it will just disappear and I'll go back to that time of confusion and trouble, but it's permanent. It feels permanent. It feels.
Also, I don't know if this is important, but in this video, it might be at the way end or the way beginning. I can't remember. Fuck. She explains how she watched somebody go mad. I was like, well. Why is it if I find patterns, I'm mentally ill? But if a lion finds patterns, it's smart. Stupid. Just another thing. Now it's like, oh, they find the patterns. They're of the same genes of like the mentally ill. Also valid, but just hear her out.
More permanent. And in fact, every day I feel more and more attached. I'll say attached and connected to God. And that connection then gives me a much stronger connection with everything else, with my family and friends and relations and my work.
Has the way you feel about Christianity changed since publicizing the Christianity that you have? Has that changed the way that you approach it? I imagine that there are a lot of people trying to help you determine which denomination you might be or iron out some of the intricacies of your theology. How has it been since actually coming out, as it were?
Well, I have to always bear in mind, and I think maybe there's an advantage to coming to Christianity as an older person, is that you keep telling yourself there is Christ and his teachings and the gospel and the Bible, and then there are the followers of Christ who are humans, and they see things differently and they experience things differently. And so, yes, I do get all these invitations of people saying, join my denomination, it's better than the other one. And here's why it's better than the other one. I also really get a lot of people who say, I prayed for you for so many years and my prayers have been answered. And of course, my answer is always, Amen. But aside from that, I also get a large number of people who are delighted that people like me, who are former atheists and vocal former atheists, are coming back and saying there's something of value to religion in general and Christianity in particular. So I get that reaction as well.
And how do you feel about the fact that a lot of people are using your conversion to put a flag in a cultural moment? I mean, such a personal story as yours, which perhaps we can relay to those who don't know, becoming a political tool for so many to say, look at what's happening in the world, look at this former atheist, look at how she's become a Christian, and putting you up on something of a pedestal. How has that been for you?
So I don't like pedestals because I don't think that it's a good way of doing things.
It's glitching. Hold on, let me check. Yeah, I see it. Okay. Hold on. I wonder if it's just the version that I downloaded. Let me put it back on 1 speed and not 1.09. And then I'm just going to export it. I'll let it keep trying at least.
Again, my attraction to Christianity is really more of the humility and the meekness and the fact that you're fallible over and over again. You sin, you admit that you're a sinner. And so by so doing, you don't, you try your best not to judge others. But then in terms of people using me, I don't feel used, but I do sense an excitement when it comes to a rekindling of religion, not so much as politics, but the religious foundations of Western society, of America, of course, and then Britain, and in the other places where Christianity.
Hirsi Ali, welcome to the show.
Okay, this should be fine. I just downloaded it.
But I do sense an excitement when it comes to a rekindling of religion, not so much as politics, but the religious foundations of Western society, of America, of course, and then Britain, and in the other places where Christianity was put down, was ridiculed, was likened to Islam and other religions, was called irrational. People who are Christians mocked and called stupid and irrational. And so I find that there's this excitement if someone like me can come back to Christianity and appreciate what it is, aside from even believing in God, just appreciating the outcome of this culture, I think is a big step. And so I don't see it as a political, it may have something political, but it is first and foremost, it's a cultural awakening or reawakening, or maybe a cultural confidence that needs to come back.
How much of your experience in the last few years of coming to Christianity has been a result of cultural considerations, and how much a result of personal considerations, or perhaps even theological considerations? Perhaps you can walk us through what it is that brought you to Christ.
It's personal, completely personal. I was in a place of complete darkness and crisis. I was terrified. I was confused. I was in this depression. I just felt this emptiness and darkness. And I resisted all invitations to spirituality because I thought, that's not me. And even at my darkest moment, when, again, I was talking to one of many therapists who said, perhaps you're spiritually bankrupt and you should try considering doing something about that. And I thought, not me. I left Islam. My associations with the concept of God was a God of punishment and a God of anger and a God in whose name so many terrible things were said and done over centuries. So I wasn't up for that. But I realized that as human beings, we are more than just reason, and that there's more than the material and the rational, and that it's not either or. It's not that you either choose reason or faith. I think you can have both of them if you understand to keep them separate. So it was 100% personal. But then, of course, I don't live in a vacuum. I look around me and I saw similar in many ways. I know my story is unique, but in many ways it's not that unique. There's a great deal of, I'll say, disconnection in our society. And people have left whatever it is that rooted them in their society and in their families and in their communities. And for many in the West, that was Christianity. And so I've come to see that it's not just the personal, but on a community level, even though.
Sorry, guys, I was focused on hiding spammy people.
On a civilizational level, the throwing away of Christianity was, I think, what was the saying, throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And so you can be like Richard Dawkins, an avowed atheist, and still appreciate the legacy of Christianity and the roots of this culture in Christianity.
As Richard Dawkins does, I just joined him in Oxford as part of his tour for a show, and when I saw him, I told him that I'd been to Evensong the night before, and I said it almost a little bit embarrassed, as if to say, to the world's most famous atheist, I quite like the choir. I went to Evensong last night, and you know what he said? Me too. I just went to a different one at a different college.
Yes.
When you came out as a Christian in Unheard, the principal reaction that I saw from people is that here is an essay that talks about Trump, it talks about Putin, it talks about China, it talks about politics, and mentions the name of Jesus, I think, precisely once, mentions Richard Dawkins, mentions cultural factors.
Hi,
And a lot of
Casper.
people read this essay, Why I Am Now a Christian, and heard essentially a political treatise and thought, is Ayaan a Christian for essentially political reasons, disconnected from the truth of the Christian doctrine? Since then, it sounds like your story has been much more personal, but people might still ask the same question. How much of this has to do with you believing that the doctrines of Christianity are true? That's also one of Richard's biggest problems or critiques.
See? Growth, baby. Love to see it. Okay, so Alex is asking if she believes this stuff to be true. And I like that he got specific here, because that's been the disagreement back and forth with Dawkins. Okay.
Is that we're all delighted to see that this has changed your life and transformed you and that you're happy again.
Yeah.
I mean, like, that nobody can disagree about that. But people will raise this question mark. Do you believe that it's true? Does that even matter to you?
I believe that it's true, and it matters very much. And I think
when I heard that, I was like, oh, fuck. Oh, fuck. Okay, we got some learning to do. I'm not saying she's wrong. But it's a data point that I definitely kept in my head. Because I'm like, okay, it kind of goes into that thing that I was talking about in other videos, which was the type of truth, the only type of truth that it would make sense to me in the framework that I'm thinking of it in would be experiential truth, which experiential, you had to go through it. I'm not saying that you have to feel God. That's not what I'm saying. It might sound that way. Just kind of got to trust me, bro, because we don't have the language. Okay. It's like trying to put two magnets together. Take what you will. Again, I know it sounds crazy. I can't decide if I should like drop, like I was saying, I was like, I don't know if I should say exactly the framework I believe it to be. I kind of gave a hint. I'm almost done with the book, you guys. I'm trying to get it out before Christmas. I wasn't even going to say that because I'm like, now I'm going to be stuck to that date. But I'm trying.
Also, I got a deluge of emails and papers all asking the same question, you know, to what degree is this personal? Is the political masquerading as personal, you know, in addition to the people who were saying, I prayed for you or come to my denomination. No, I believe it. What I will not do, which is, I think, hard for people like Richard, is take my 21st century brain and explain past century events. But I'm reading a lot. I'm reading the Gospels, I'm reading Old Testament, New Testament, I'm reading the apologetics. And a world is opening up for me that in many ways I find so fascinating and enriching. And I will not tell you that I can explain the miracles that took place in the past century. I can't explain them, but I do choose to believe in them. And that's a completely different attitude. And having that.
Going to trigger us atheists. I choose to believe. Can you choose to believe in something? The miracle thing. What is a miracle by definition? Miracle. A surprising and welcome event that is not explicable by nature or scientific laws and is therefore considered to be the work of divine agency. In my framework, miracles don't exist. However, arguably a miracle would be grounded and predictable based on the knowledge that it's deterministic. Not saying that very well. So for instance, somebody loses somebody to death. Horrible. This person transforms that into being an advocate for addiction. I don't know if that would classify as a miracle, but people look back like, oh, you know what? It was kind of a miracle that happened because I grew so much. Or you have the miracle that's like, friend is dying from addiction and all their organs are shutting down, and then all of a sudden they recover in a day. Also would be called a miracle. How would you differentiate the two? Because I've heard them in both types of contexts. Is there another definition? A highly improbable or extraordinary event, development, or accomplishment that brings very welcome consequences. An amazing product or achievement or an outstanding example of something. In the first one, it was a supernatural phenomenon, a mystery, prodigy, sign. An amazing sensation, phenomenon, astonishing. Object of wonder. Miraculum, object of wonder. See, it's funny because it's like, okay. Old French from Latin, miraculum, aka object of wonder, from mirare to wonder, from wonderful. It's only wonder until you operate in determinism. Just saying. I'm thinking out loud, okay? We'll go back. Okay, so just to recap, she says, I choose to believe, and we already know Alex is going to be triggered by it. I say triggered because he's like, not triggered maybe, but he'll talk on his show like, you can't just get somebody to believe in something. You can't force somebody into a belief that they don't have. And that's right. You got to ground it. I can.
Faith. Faith.
Can you tell I'm excited?
As you know, you have faith. This is, I think, where it's important to separate reason from faith.
Right.
Is I'm not going to prove it, and you don't need proof. You believe, and so having embarked on that path, I find what I read strengthens that faith more and more each day, and it's a pity. And this is sort of a statement to my fellow atheists, to lead a life of constantly fortifying yourself against faith. And then in that way, you create a counterfaith.
So 33 Cigarette says, Christ being dead, like no shot of survival, dead. And then physically rising from the dead is a miracle. It has no natural explanation. So personally, I hear you. You're right. Except I don't think that in the Bible, that's what they were trying to convey. I think what they were trying to convey is sort of like a rebirth into a more whole consciousness, because you know how they say, like, you're born in sin? Okay, forgive me. You're born in sin. Isn't that the same as saying you were born into a shitty childhood? To me, it is. You could argue that like most people have a form of childhood trauma, even if they had good parents. Shit happens, right? And so most people come to that sort of realization either around 18 years old. Some people figure it out, if they didn't figure it out at 18, at like 30. And so why does that happen? Could it be a developmental thing? Maybe. Maybe. I would say it depends on what circumstances you were in. Okay. Everything in my worldview is dependent on what came before it. So if you chose to, Christians would call it operate in degeneracy. I would say if you choose not to seek therapy, for instance, you kind of are being controlled by desires, addictions, that sort of baseline lizard brain. But when you do come to the realization, it's almost like your brain fully develops. It's like you're whole. It's equivalent to like somebody who's addicted to alcohol does like the IV ketamine treatment and now no longer wants cigarettes. Or I'm sorry, not cigarettes, alcohol. Like addictions. And it's like, well, what happened? I don't know. I've never done ketamine, let alone through the administration of an IV. But if you've ever talked to anybody that has gone through that, it's sort of like a trip of like, people will say it's almost like a really warm and fuzzy parental thing. When they describe it, it quite honestly sounds the same as somebody saying they like spoke to God or like they felt God. It sounds the same, which is interesting. Is there something going on in the brain? Well, yeah, but that's the consciousness part. And so like you brought up the thing coming back from the dead. What I'm trying to convey, even though it's taken me fucking forever, is that I think there is a rebirth that happens. It's with that integration of self. So you integrate the unconscious self, which I would argue most of our society and degeneracy, chaos, if you will, is because there's like an identity crisis. And I would argue that it's from the unconscious self. And so if people, you know, when I say they're demons, if people can see their demons, aka when they project, if what I say triggers you and you have this instant response of like us versus them, okay, if you can be aware of those things, then you kind of integrate yourself. People won't say it like that, but that's the truth. And so I think like him coming back from the dead is that rebirth into consciousness. Okay. Is it insane? Absolutely. Is it true? I think so. Still working that part out. But let's keep going.
In non-faith. And you
A
don't
little
allow
bit, I know.
even a tiny opening because you're creating this bad.
The thing about Carl Jung is that Carl Jung did not, what did he not do? He recognized that myths in the Bible had similarly the same thing as like patience or whatever. They report the same thing, and he made that connection. What I'm trying to say is, if we take that as truth and that is the science to it, it grounds religion in a really strange way. Can you do that? Like, can you take something from two systems? You can. The issue is that a lot of times it won't always give you the accurate like outcome. It won't always be an equation that's like 100%, like gravity or whatever. And it's like, in hard determinism, which is something I believe in, I know it's a fringe concept, but it lines up. If we assume that people are doing this, which I would argue most of like the issues right now stem from identity. And if you don't believe me, Maybe you will later, okay? Like the video if you haven't liked it already.
Years around, you don't allow any. We used to say, one thing I liked about the Enlightenment, and I still do, is don't prejudge.
Also, something that Jordan Peterson was questioning, which just popped into my mind, so I'm gonna just say it. He was questioning what would be the purpose for people like to write the Bible down. And this was a dilemma that I came face to face with when I was 21. And I found that when I would try, even recently, when I would try to relay an experience that some people don't have capacity, for instance, I was always met with like a the person always reacted poorly to it. They weren't hearing what I was saying. And so I was like, am I going crazy? Because I'm out here making a distinction about capacity. And when I try to say it to somebody who I argue has capacity, no, that's not. Almost every time. And anybody that has dealt with this similar instance with somebody who is like gone mad and they're questioning the same shit, they always say, nobody believes me when I tell them. And the only logical conclusion to that is that somebody is operating from that unconscious self. It's like the triggered response, the evil, if you will. Easy. And so I was like, why is it when I write shit down on a Substack piece, people get it? Why is it when I put it into a story, people get it? It's crazy. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. And I'm like, well, could it possibly be that when people are reading something and they can go over it a few times, or maybe when they're reading, they can acknowledge those sort of reactions? There's something about it though, that it's almost like when you put something in words, like on paper, something you can refer back to. It's not just in the ear, out the other. It grounds it in a way where people get to like let the walls down and like actually consider what is being said. Now, I don't know if that is possibly the purpose for it. Okay. I don't know, but it is something that I had taken note of. And it's one of the reasons that I even started writing that book at 21. But for years, I was like, what? There's something missing. There's something missing, and I can't figure out what it is. But now, realizing that it could be that unconscious self, it makes it all fit. That's something to be cautious of, though. You never want to jump on something like I could be delusional, right? I understand.
Come, to the table with no preconceived notions about what you're going to hear or see. And that's not what my fellow atheists were doing. They were just really fortifying themselves against ever believing. And they had very solid preconceived notions. And then that in itself became a gospel of its own. And so there is the new atheism. This is what we believe in, versus the people who believe in God. And then again, it has a bit of a tribal element to it, where this is, that's you and that's me.
People listening will think, well, no, atheism is just a disbelief in God. Here's a worldview that's being presented to me, and I'm saying I don't believe it. What is, in your view, as formerly one of the most important figures in the New Atheist movement, what can you now see as the gospel of New Atheism? What is that? What is New Atheism's 10 commandments? What does it look like as a worldview?
I think the reason why it was called New Atheism was that it had this, what do you call it, this evangelizing aspect to it. Because yes, you're right, atheism, or to be an atheist, is simply to take on the attitude of, say, I don't think there's any proof. Convince me. If I see evidence of the existence of God, I might change my mind.
Okay. I'm going to just for a moment. I wanted to pause it at that moment because I want to read the comments on this video. I feel like it's useful. Wherever the fuck it went. Where is it? Here we go. Okay. Halfway through, and it honestly feels like she found religion due to depression. More power to her for being happier now, but her blanket statements about atheists and how she found her way to Jesus doesn't sound very enlightening. Next one. I've never watched an hour-long interview before with my eyes rolled back in my head until now. The first one got 203 likes, the second one 91. This video's at 50,000 views at this moment. The next one, next, why the flat earth works for me politically, 97 likes. The next part, if a therapist told her that she was spiritually bankrupt, sorry, I can't say that, the therapist should lose his or her license. Any therapist who talks about spirituality is a charlatan who should start a career as a religious apologist. Fun fact, so you can, depending on where you go and where you fill out the form, they will ask you, do you want a religious therapist or do you want a regular one? There's like many forms that talk about how it's technically the same. They just switch out some words. Crazy, isn't it? Keep going though. Breaking news, Christianity is appealing to the emotionally vulnerable. So what is the theme right now? Judgment. That's the theme. These why would there be judgment from like my worldview? Arguably, she is saying things that are triggering atheists. Never once did she say that this is the right way that everybody should follow. But they are all interpreting it as a threat to their belief set. Arguably evangelical, like she's talking about. And this is the truth about atheists in general, is that the behavior is the same. And so is it a worldview, or is it possibly that people are just lacking identity, lacking something, right? What I'm not saying is that people have to believe in God or agnostic. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying if you take what she's saying right now personally, it's not a fair critique. If you're trying to justify why she's saying that she followed it and you're making assumptions, that's on you. That's projection. And so the reason I say this is because I think as a society, if we can become aware of when we project, it's like everybody can arguably, it takes some time, but you can sort of like evolve. That sounds so pretentious, but like I mean it well. But it's like you gain a new awareness. I'm telling you, I think I'm onto something. My dogs need to go outside, but let's go back.
So,
are you good?
That attitude hardened into something along the lines of, there is no proof. There is no evidence. Therefore, I don't believe in God. And not only that, people who believe in God are wicked, they're dangerous, they're stupid, they're superstitious. And therefore, we must evangelize against them. And I think in hindsight, I'm speaking for myself, that was a very unhealthy attitude to take because you close off so much.
We'll get back to Ayaan in just a moment. But first, do you trust the news media?
I got to take my dogs outside. We're going to have to do the rest of this tomorrow, but hopefully I'll have my fucking thoughts on track. If she ends up going back to sleep quickly, then I'll come back on. But it took me so long to get on here. Hopefully you enjoyed the first part. Like the video, comment, subscribe. Love you. Goodbye.